see the screen a little better? You guys ready for a 6-hour odyssey? I hope you guys brought some coffee, I'll tell you. Jesus. Oh, check the video. They're just going to check the video real quick. Alright, I'll tell you what. Go for it. So what I've done, you guys, is any audio? No audio. Standing by. You guys have any, no, tape doesn't go behind that. Standing by. So I put together just a little snapshot history of some of the promotional stuff I've done over the years. Some of it's actually quite funny because I was a complete, not that I'm anybody today, but I'm more than I was when I first started. My name is out there a bit more, and I've met with people, and I have some access. I didn't have any access to any media. I didn't have any access to anybody. In fact, it was like the most difficult thing was getting access. And people think all the time, oh, well, you know, these guys are out there just trying to sell their story. I'm like, you have no idea how hard it is to get a guy, a witness on camera. The better the witness, the way more difficult it is to ever get that person to come get on camera for you. I can tell you stories with every single person I've got on camera, the nightmares that I've gone through. I've flown out to meet with people, huge budgets. Like, hey, what I do is a lot of times is I'll get this whole story together, and then I'll go to an investor and say, hey, I've got this all together. Now I need the money, because that's the easiest way. As long as you've got some goodie that the investor knows about. So I'll do that a lot of times. And I've shown up to do the interview, and they're like, I can't do it. It's like, excuse me, but I just like borrowed all this money, and I flew all this way. I mean, really? Like, you know, but that happens. That happens. And it's happened to some very high-profile people that I've tried to get over the years, which I'll show you guys today, revealing the contents of my presentation here. So, I'm sorry, you were on it before. Hang on a second.
For about a decade, documentary filmmaker James Fox has focused on UFO sightings in part because he had one. Tonight, his latest film, Out of the Blue, premieres on the Sci-Fi Channel. He joins us from San Francisco. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Why do you think the government doesn't want that info out?
I would imagine, this is informed speculation, if there were objects of unknown origin that could penetrate very sensitive airspace and fly rings around our fastest jets, those in a position of power wouldn't want to kind of relinquish that information to the general public for possible fear of causing another War of the Worlds announcement, which happened in 1939 with Orson Welles.
Now, CBS 2 News at 11.
It's a debate that has raged for over 50 years. Are UFOs real?
95 to 97% of all UFO sightings can be explained away in down-to-earth prosaic terms. There's a remaining 3 to 5% sightings that have been made by extremely credible observers of very incredible things.
James Fox is an independent filmmaker who spent 3 years and traveled across 6 countries to create a new documentary called Out of the Blue.
Ну, я летчик-истребитель. Я знаю многие типы летательных аппаратов, но это ни на что не похоже.
In his film, Fox contends that many of the cases our government either denies or can't explain have been made by people working for the government.
Trained military personnel, trained radar operators, airline pilots, military pilots. These people are trained to know what flies around our skies. They also have access and they're privy to some of the most state-of-the-art technology that we're dealing with today.
We had ground visual, ground radar, airborne visual, and airborne radar.
Is there life beyond planet Earth? 2 Bay Area men get ready to show their evidence to the world.
Now, we are talking aliens today, and Out of the Blue is an award-winning documentary that tells us all that UFOs might not be the myth we think they are. Take a look.
It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way.
50 years of official denial are coming to an end.
There's nothing to hide. There's nothing to hide at all. Nothing to hide at all.
For the first time anywhere, hear all new testimony from the highest levels of our government.
This is not science fiction. This is science fact.
The evidence is credible. The conclusions are incredible. Sci-Fi presents a world broadcast premiere, a Tuesday declassified special, Out of the Blue. Premieres next Tuesday at 9, only on Sci-Fi.
Now, you are a believer in UFOs, correct?
Well, let's put it this way. The high-ranking military officials that I've spoken with from around the world tell me that they're real. So based on that evidence, yes, I do.
Incidentally, I was a private pilot, so I have some familiarity with the airspace.
It glided over my house, and there was absolutely no noise.
What I thought to be a kind of a boomerang shape.
44, just confirming that all the passengers can see this aircraft.
How would you describe the acceleration?
Probably the speed of light.
I would go ahead and feel the craft, which was warm.
If these extraterrestrials are so highly evolved, how come it is that they only address people named Bubba who are out hunting and fishing?
I'm Fife Symington. In 1997, during my second term as governor of Arizona, I saw something that defied logic and challenged my reality.
I saw one, but I don't know where it just disappeared.
And the saucer flew right over him and put down 3 little gear and landed out on the dry lake bed.
On Monday, former high-level government employees, military officials, and pilots from all over the world will come together. They'll discuss their own UFO sightings and encounters, and they'll do it at the National Press Club in the nation's capital.
This is when we first saw the UFO. This is when the pilot saw the UFO. This is when the military guy saw the UFO.
Performing speeds and maneuvers significantly in excess of anything that they'd seen military jet aircraft perform.
Physical traces on the ground from the craft were confirmed by the local police.
James Fox helped organize today's UFO-related event in Washington. He directed the film Out of the Blue.
The official position from the Air Force is that they terminated Project Blue Book in 1969, and there have been no official investigations since then.
We have not been hiding anything.
They are simply following orders.
Don't rock the boat. Play it down. Cool it.
Ma'am, I have no reason to believe that they're real.
Thousands of witnesses now, which can confirm that indeed this so. Activities which cannot be related to terrestrial activities.
It's not going to be, as I say, disclosure with a big D. Right. It's going to be disclosure with a small d.
If the government's announced, well, the unidentified objects are real, people would panic?
I cannot say yes, but I cannot say no.
Why do you think the Air Force doesn't want this out?
I wish they would. If the Air Force is listening tonight, why don't you tell us the truth?
There are people who said they saw things, and whenever that happens, they deserve at least an investigation, it seems to me.
I think it's time to open the books. It's time to find out what the truth really is that's out there.
It went at a 45-degree angle away.
We ought to do it really because it's right.
My response was we could land all 40 of our B-2 bombers on the wing of that craft.
We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth.
I know what I saw, and I get very upset, and I was wondering why they won't find out what it was.
And we ought to do it because it's the law.
So I wanted to play that snapshot history. It sort of takes me back to when I first, got into this and leading up to my 20-plus year journey. And then just talk a little bit about some of the struggles I've had along the way, because I feel like that seems to be far more interesting to a lot of people that are familiar with my work, just my personal struggle with it, because it's been incredibly challenging. I remember there have been times when I stepped out onto the back deck and looked up at the stars and thought, oh God, somebody's got to help me with this one. I don't know if I can do this. Something good's got to happen soon, because, But so it's interesting. So I wanted to, I remember I told you about, there's my father. We were interviewing Stephen Hawking in England. There's me kind of in the corner there. His whole process with me in my decision making to do documentaries on UFO, that was really, really difficult for me. I don't know if any of you out there have had any friends or family that have been highly dubious of your interest in UFOs or not, but I certainly experienced that. And I slowly saw his progression over the years. And funny enough, there were some times when I used his disability to get access to some of the, which I'll share with you some funny moments of that. Briefly, so I guess, yeah, just basically, I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, so I went along with my father to all of his interviews since I was a little boy. And then I finally said to my dad, I got this amazing break, because I've been trying to get to Mercury astronaut Gordon Cooper for quite some time. Pretty much everyone of any substance or any credibility factor, it was years. In fact, I remember talking to Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14, sixth man to walk the moon. Finally got him to meet with me. And I'm at his house in Florida, and we're walking together doing B-roll shots. And I turned to him and I said, Dr. Mitchell, I said, God, why did you suddenly just, why did you agree to finally, get together with me? Because I had letters of, denial for years. He goes, well, you just wouldn't go away. Okay, so persistence does pay, I guess. Lesson of the day. So anyway, I got a call back finally from Gordon Cooper, and he agreed to meet with me. And I thought, well, God, I'm going to take my dad on this one. Now, taking my father is no easy task. He's a baby, he's a 200-pound, neck down. I mean, it's like it's a lot of work. And on top of that, I'm doing filming, I'm doing this interview, and I thought, but this is important. This is an iconic figure of my father's generation. And I want my father to hear this guy's testimony. So I brought my father. One of the best things I ever did. And there's my dad and Gordo. You guys ever see the Right Stuff? Remember? Go, hot dog, go! That was good old Gordo. But Gordo had this, no-nonsense. He didn't want any money. He didn't want anything in return. He was like, look, this is what happened, and that's it. And he talked about his experience while piloting a plane over Germany, where these discs would appear and then shoot off at 90-degree angle turns at high speed. He's like, there's just nothing. He goes, I was involved with very top-secret military stuff at the time. There's just nothing that we had that could duplicate that type of flight curve. It's just nothing. No wings, no tails, no visible means of propulsion, 90-degree angle turns at high speed, and just flying rings around us. Then he talks about this filming of an installation for F-86 fighter jets at Edwards Air Force Base in the early 50s. And I wish I could give you an exact year, but I just know that it was in the early 50s. And he says that his camera crew saw this unidentified object, this double lenticular-shaped object in broad daylight land on the dry lake bed. So they turned their cameras off from the F-86 fighter jet installation and filmed this flying saucer sitting on the dry lake bed. And roll cameras. The object eventually lifts off. He said that the gear, the landing gear, folded up into the belly of this thing, and then it just went poof, and just shot off. So he gets the film footage developed, and and while that's happening, he's getting higher and higher and higher up at the Pentagon with these military officers, right up to the top. They sent a courier jet out to pick up this film footage. And I said, well, did you watch the film? He said, no. And I held it up to the light, and I looked through it, saw the object, saw that it was great footage. It all came out wonderful. Handed this footage over to a courier jet flying in from Washington, D.C., and it was gone and never was seen or ever heard from ever again. So my dad was sitting there just going, Jesus, this is a real turning point, because my dad's like, well, this guy's got everything to lose and nothing to gain. So why on earth? What's going on? Oh, right. It's back on again. That's good. So that was kind of a turning point for my father. I mean, it really was a turning point for my father. He thought, well, maybe my son's onto something. Why on earth would this guy put his credibility on the line for nothing? And so slowly he started to think about it. And then at the same time, this is a really funny story, you guys. I don't know if some of you have heard this or not, but this is hilarious. You would never in a million years get away with what we did. So I tried for 4 years, 5 years, to get Jimmy Carter on camera. I think I'm trying to remember what his secretary's name was at the time. But no. Just constant nose. And so I look up the president's speaking engages and find out that he's coming to San Francisco, which I live just an hour north of San Francisco, at a place called Stacy's Bookstore to sign his new book release, copy of his book. So I was like, well, God, they're going to have like probably a media section where they can ask him questions and whatnot. My dad actually said, can I go with you? And I remember thinking, boy, this is going to be tough to bring my father, but yeah, we can do this. So we all jumped in the car. It was my co-producer, Tim Coleman, myself, and my father. And we had camera gear and stuff. And when we show up, it's a mob scene. Like, he's got Secret Service, and there are hundreds and hundreds of people waiting, queuing up in line to see, like, it was a multi-level, like, building, and Stacy's Bookstore, and the signing of books was going to be on the second level. And the lines queued up right down the sidewalk. I don't know if you call them sidewalks. We call them sidewalks. Right down the sidewalk outside. I mean, it went down. We got there kind of early. And they made it abundantly clear that there was not going to be any media asking him any questions. That was not going to happen. But what they did, so we're sitting there scrambling, going, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Like, we're sitting there going, gosh. Then we're on the second level. So one of the advantages of my father being in a wheelchair is that, you know, a lot of times we would get ahead of the lines, or we get, you know, they just kind of give you a little, which is good, because there's very few advantages to being paralyzed from the neck down. You take advantage of the few that were there. So we're sitting there scratching our heads going, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And just then, President Carter walks into the room. And there's a lot of people in the room. And my dad is in his wheelchair. I'm standing next to him. And President Carter walks right over to my father, touches his knee, looks at him, and then goes off to his podium to sign books. I thought, oh my God, this is one of the most compassionate guys, like, clearly. So we looked at each other, and my dad looked at me, and I said, I got an idea. He's like, what is it? I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to buy as many books as we got money on us. Okay? Then when it gets to our turn, you're going to have a stack of books on your leg. And it's going to take him a few minutes, because you're not supposed to ask, you can take a photograph of him, but not with him. Right? You can't really be supposed to ask him questions, but how's he possibly going to say no to a quadriplegic, right? So I said, Tim, go get as many books as you can buy. So Tim goes back and he buys like 10 books. He's like, that's it. That's all the money I've got. So he stacks these books up on my dad's lap. And I am desperately in the back of the room. Like I said, post 9/11, you'd never get away with this today. I'm putting together wireless microphones and getting my camera all sorted out. And I got tripods out. And I got my backpack. And I'm looking around like trying to get it all set up. And I've got a wireless mic connected to my father's. I mean, it's kind of you know, connected to my dad's shirt. Okay. And my dad also had a little amplification system where he had this little, looked like Madonna, you know, when they go out on stage and they got the little thing. Well, my dad's diaphragm was really weak. So we wired my father up. And I thought, you know, in the name of truth, no one's ever gotten Jimmy Carter on camera. There's been radio interviews, but not on camera, talking about, you know, seeing a UFO and what he did when he became president. So I said, okay, well, guys, I'll be in the back of the room on a Zoom, and you guys, you know, I'm literally probably standing here, and they're way on the other side of the room. Let's say we're a long way away, and I can't hear a damn thing. I have absolutely no idea what's going on, what's being said, but my whole objective was just to get Carter and my dad on camera from the back of the room. So I make the way up the line, get the thing, and people are kind of standing in front of me, and I remember I was like dodging around the back, trying to get around people, like, come on, they move, like zooming in, and they do the little thing, and then I see at one point Carter kind of looked through the crowd and looked right in my camera lens, which kind of shocked me, because I was like, oh Jesus, they're on to me, kind of thing. Anyway, so then they get the book signed, off we go, and out the door we go. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the clip for you now, and then I'm going to play if anyone has a problem with profanity, plug your ears, because there's a little bit of profanity that comes here. But hang on a second, I think I got to go. Here we go. So my dad was raised in Kenya, Africa, so you'll get the terminology from that in a second here. Here we go.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, President Carter. Nice to meet you all.
Once again.
I see you on that.
I hope you enjoy the book.
Thank you very much. I wonder if you could tell me
What happened to the UFO issue?
What happened to
the UFO issue?
I don't really know what happened to it. I saw one, but I don't know what. It just disappeared.
Okay, great. When you asked, when you became president, did you ask?
Did you ask when you were president? What he said?
Yes, but there's a lot of different answers, and nobody has proof of things. Okay. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, it's an honor to meet you.
Okay, I'm just capturing on camera moments after the event. Yeah. How enlightened we all are. That was most outstanding. Sorry, I just have to say that. Here we are in fucking Starbucks of all places.
Man, fucking give me 5. Give me 5.
What do you have to say for yourself, Dad?
Mao, the president.
Nobody knew that little backstory. Sorry.
So, did you hear what he was asking when the guy asked him, or you asked him, how about that, or, what was that last thing that said?
He said, well, what about when you were president? Did you ask when you were president? And he said,
the very last what he said.
My dad said, we Mao the president. Yeah. We Mao the president. So listen to this. When we sold Out of the Blue to NBC Universal, the lawyers looked at that footage and they were like, ooh, God, this is really sketchy. Like, they were like, did he give any signature? They're like, not really. Did he give you permission? No, not really. They're like, oh, this is a real big gray zone, but it is a president. They're like, oh, gosh. I was like, well, I mean, you can film the place. I mean, they said you could take his picture. So, it was like, yeah, but, So we had to really, it was really touch and go as to whether or not that would remain in the film. But I never really shared that until a couple of years back when I was asked to give a presentation, and I decided, what the hell, let's talk about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, because most people don't know that. They watch Out of the Blue, got a quick little thing, but it's like, there's a story behind that, and it's a funny story, I think. And some people might question, my integrity by doing that, but, I feel like it's a president, he had a sighting, he needs to talk about it. So, you know what I mean? And if he was told not to talk about it, this gets him off the hook too. Because be like, well, I didn't talk about it publicly. I didn't know I was on camera. So, it all seemed to work out well. So let me go. Yeah, so this is again, so I was chiseling away on Out of the Blue, and we were, just to give you some idea, in the editing conditions, we were in a basement for years. Yeah, and this is an interesting story. Who knows Peter Coyote? You guys know? So Peter Coyote is a really well-known mainstream voice in America. He did this whole Parks series for Ken Burns just recently. His voice is very recognizable. So I had gotten an in with Peter Coyote, and I got an initial green light that he would narrate Out of the Blue, which is a really big coup for a UFO film, right? So when I got there, he was like, oh, I thought you were somebody else. I said, what do you mean I thought I was somebody else? He's like, oh, yeah, no, I thought you were somebody else. I don't know if I can do this. I was like, oh, well, and we slowly talked to him and warmed him up. And I said, look, you can take a look at the film. This is not crazy. This is a very grounded approach. Blah, blah. And he reluctantly agreed to narrate Out of the Blue, which I don't know if you guys realize just how significant that was, but it was very significant for us because it really gave it a stamp of approval, a level of credibility that we just wouldn't have gotten with anybody else. And again, most people don't realize. So when I'd gotten to that stage of the film, and I've done this in the past with other people, the film was already pretty much done, so I could show it to them, and you could say, take a look. Like, I'm not promoting anything crazy out there. This is all pretty grounded, mostly with military testimony or mass sighting stuff. And so he agreed to do it. And he goes, oh, all I need is one take. And I know because I used my voice as a scratch track for the thing. And I wrote the bloody script with my other directors, producers. And so he's like, oh, no, I'll do this in one go. I don't need to. I said, you want to review that? Oh, no, I got this. He went up there and he pronounced the French names, the Russian names, everything just just nailed it. I don't think he repeated one word in the entire movie. Like, this guy just nailed it on one take. He's a true professional. And since then, he has, we did a re-release of Out of the Blue. I don't know if you guys know. We had a, oh, this is really funny. God, you guys are going to laugh on this one. He had, when I finished Out of the Blue, and I think maybe I should talk about this a little later. Oh, so this was the first version of Out of the Blue, which took 5 years. And we spent 2 or 3 more years on Out of the Blue after this first version. I'll talk about that in a minute. So this is, when you don't have any connections in the media and you're just a complete nobody, this is the lengths that I was willing to go to get some recognition, to get some airtime. And this is a morning show in New York City in the dead of winter. Cold, cold, cold. Out there before it got light out. Trying to get, in the lines. And I've got this big, well, you'll see. I won't tell you.
Chris Cimino tells us it's going to struggle to get out of the upper 20s all week long as we get a little cold blast from the north. Meanwhile, inside, the
southwest, temperatures in the 70s there. That's a quick look at the national weather. Here's a look now at your local forecast.
Outside Studio 1A, I'm Matt Lauer. Katie is in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where, Katie, I'm assuming it's a little bit warmer this morning or this afternoon.
Week, whatever. So you really want to kind of take advantage of that, and I'll get to that in a second. Now, this is kind of funny. This is a side story. I don't know if you guys want me to get to this. And you guys write your questions down, and I promise you we'll have Q&A later. Because if I get off my train of thought, I'm just going to be a complete jello mess up here. All right. So in one of our media CNN appearances, who other than Buzz Aldrin is there to go on camera with us? Well, I don't know if now would be the right time, but I'm certainly glad to tell you about my Buzz Aldrin story. It's kind of relevant. Do you guys want to hear it? Yeah. So I rewind back to the early 90s. I worked on a movie set in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I met a girl in a bar, and she's like, you got to come to Santa Fe. We were in Telluride, Colorado. She's like, you got to come to Santa Fe. Santa Fe is really cool. I was like, well, I'm in Telluride. She's like, well, I'm driving there tomorrow. If you want to come with me and my friends, you can come to check Santa Fe out. So I go to Santa Fe. I stay there a month. I get on a movie set. I'm working with a guy named on a movie called The Legend of Obie Taggart. And on this movie set is Mickey Rooney. And Mickey Rooney, I'm his prison guard. And long story short, Mickey Rooney tells me a story about how he's good friends with Buzz Aldrin. And he's like, well, what are you doing, sonny boy? I'm like, well, I'm doing this UFO, blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, really? He goes, well, I'm good friends with Buzz Aldrin, and I know he had a UFO encounter. He had a couple of them, and he told us about it. And I was like, wow, tell me more. Long story short, I end up meeting, so I get the Rooneys working on Buzz Aldrin, and then I meet his sister, Faye-Ann Potter, who lives in Kentfield, California, at an event for a friend of mine was bartending for an art show. So anyway, so I have lunch with Faye-Ann Potter, who's in her late 70s, early 80s, and she's like, my brother had 2 sightings. They saw something on the way to the moon, and I said, well, I really want to get him on camera for my... So she's like, let me work on him. So Mickey Rooney and Faye-Ann Potter work on getting me an interview with Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin says yes. He says, I'm going to be on book tour. This is the 90s, late 90s. I'll be on book tour in Monte Carlo, and I'll meet him in Monte Carlo. So I'm like, okay, well, Monte Carlo it is. So I borrow a bunch of money. I fly with a couple people down to the south of France, Monte Carlo, and I have his contact information. And every day, he keeps postponing the interview to the next day. And Monte Carlo, I don't know if you guys have been there or not, it is insanely expensive. Like, you can't even step outside without getting pulverized with $300 worth of whatever the hell. I mean, I had the cheapest room. It was $400 a night. I was hemorrhaging money. I was terrified. I don't even think I had a credit card at the time. It was like I was running out of money, like day after day after day. And I finally said, Mr. Aldrin, with all due respect, I've traveled thousands of miles. You promised me this interview. He goes, okay. Meet me tomorrow in my hotel room. And of course, he's staying in the fanciest hotel. Meet me in the hotel lobby. And don't have any cameras rolling. I said, no cameras will be rolling. We'll meet you there. He goes, okay, I'll see you there at, whatever, 8 o'clock. So, of course, 7:45, I show up. I'm having coffee. The concierge comes out. Mr. Fox, I'd like you have a telephone call from Mr. Aldrin. I was like, okay. So I go there. I pick the phone up in the lobby. He's like, I can't do it. I said, what do you mean you can't do it? He goes, well, Paul Allen just invested in SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and he got labeled a UFO nut, and I'm trying to get funding from Congress to develop a rocket to put citizens in outer space, and I can't jeopardize that initiative, and how's my story going to change anything anyway? I was devastated. I mean, it was like I was speechless, and I said, well, Mr. Aldrin, it takes people like of your stature and credibility to really come forward and help elevate this whole phenomenon, and you are, you know, iconic figure in the eye of the world. You landed on the moon with Neil Armstrong. Like, your story is like really important, actually. Like, and you promised me this interview, and he's like, well, I can't do it. That was it, done. I actually have a photograph. I should dig it up. A friend of mine took in that cafe right after I had the phone call. I was absolutely gutted. I mean, it's speechless. It was a very low point in production for me. So anyway, so fast forward, all this stuff's going on. I got the governor of Five-Simonton coming forward. I'm revisiting Out of the Blue, and things are going really well. And I suddenly find myself on CNN all these years later with Buzz Aldrin. So I turn to Governor Five-Simonton. I tell him quickly the story. And I said, I'm going to get him so good out there. This is live television. And the governor says, James, you know, he's a very famous guy. He landed on the moon with Neil Armstrong. You really can't do that on live television to that guy. He's like, I suggest you get out there and you bite your tongue and don't say anything. And I was like, Governor, he's like, I know it's going to be difficult, but please, that's what you should do. So I went on television with him, and I sat there right a live CNN for an hour. And I just, you know, and I said very little, and I was listening to him lie to Larry King and lie to the American public and just going, I cannot believe this is happening. And what can I do? And I called him afterwards, and I even said something to Buzz Aldrin. He goes, well, I suggest, why don't you go talk to your other friend, Gordon Cooper and Edgar Mitchell. They'll tell you about it, you know, like just, and his sister called me, Faye Ann Potter, and she's like, they've gotten to him. I said, what do you mean they've gotten to him? She said, he won't even talk to me about it anymore. And one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't get Faye Ann Potter on camera. She died talking about it. It's one of my biggest regrets. And I knew it at the time that I should have done it, and I didn't. And I don't know if Buzz Aldrin will ever come forward. I have no idea. But I'll swear to you on my life and the life of my son, that is exactly what happened. And it's incredibly frustrating. So, this is a shot of all of us on Larry King. There's Buzz Aldrin looking off to his left, and there's Governor Simonton and good old Stanton Friedman back there. That's my sister with the necklace on, Kelly. She's been incredibly helpful over the years. This is, so here we are going again on Out of the Blue. So I'm revisiting Out of the Blue, and my two other previous partners were like, you know, we did this film, we sold it, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And they were done. But fortunately, I had the attention of the media at the time, and so it was easier for me to get new funders. So I had to buy them out and get new people on board and keep pushing. And so I pushed, and I pushed, and I pushed. And this is really cool. I was filming, you know, witnesses, because you'd hear these stories in the Phoenix case, and they often refer to the Phoenix case as the Phoenix Lights case. Well, look, if you talk to the good witnesses, it had nothing to do with lights. It was a craft that was a mile across from wingtip to wingtip. I had eyewitness accounts. That's a Northwest Airlines pilot with the hat on right there, the cowboy hat, and he was like, he just sat there and watched this thing float. He said it was almost dragging on the ground. It was so slow across the night sky, and he's like, this thing was the size of a mountain range. Like, it was huge. And so when you hear the testimony of people talking about a craft, when you hear the governor talking about this thing had to be a massive craft, it was all flying, you know. When you hear the Air Force talk about, oh, we dropped some military flares, you're like, are you kidding me? Like, but the people don't know, and they buy that. They buy that explanation. It was a C-10 Warthog dropping flares over the mountain range in the shape of a V, and end of story. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Even the governor testifying. So I was doing follow-up interviews with some of these witnesses, which is amazing. These guys, the Watson family, they were sitting on their front lawn, okay? So Sue, the older woman there, oh, that's Stacy Rhodes. Okay, so this is the woman, sorry, I gotta show you. This is the woman that I called before I went with Five-Simonton on this, and she's the one that gave me the recording I was telling you about. That's Sue Watson, and that's her. These are her 3 kids, and that's her house. This is the lawn. They were standing on the front yard, looking off this mountain range, and the object came right over them, and it took about, she said, about 3 to 5 minutes to pass overhead. Her 2 kids were lying on her back, and he said he was looking up at this thing, and he could see compartments and stuff in it. They were like, this thing was going to land. I mean, clearly this thing's landing. And it went over the top of them. It got out, I don't know how far, quarter mile, half a mile away, and then they said it took off like warp speed. Like it just went, pew, it was gone. She said it kind of did this little thing, and then it just went, no air disturbance, no sound whatsoever, and amazing. So I was doing these pickup interviews for this, you know, the newer version of Out of the Blue. And I get a phone call from CNN, because it was still kind of in the limelight a bit when this whole thing was happening. It was fun. It was a very fun wave to ride. I get a phone call right after this photograph was taken. I get a phone call from CNN. They're like, do you want to go on Larry King Live in New York tomorrow morning? I said, what's going on? Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you one thing. My voice was gone. I got a text message from the producers at CNN that there was a sighting in Stephenville, Texas. We had airline tickets that night to fly to Chicago because the O'Hare sighting had just happened. You guys remember the O'Hare thing? So I was off, and I was in touch with a couple of United Airlines people at O'Hare. They were like, I don't know if I was going to get them to go on camera or not, but I wanted to go meet with them, and I was just going to do everything I could to try and uncover whatever I could at O'Hare Airport. Well, I got a phone call from CNN. They're like, there's a massive sighting, very similar to the one that was over, you know, in Phoenix Lights. Massive craft, police involved, Air Force involved. So I canceled all of our tickets to O'Hare. I had a whole film crew ready to go because we were already out filming for Out of the Blue. And they flew to Stephenville, Texas, and I jumped on an airplane. But this is the funny part. My voice was gone. I was talking like this. But I was like, I'm not going to miss an opportunity to go on CNN Live. So I and I kept texting them. She said, you got to call me. There's a lot of details we got to iron out here. And I kept texting, I'm really busy, can't call you right now, just because I knew that if I heard my voice, there was no way they're going to put me on TV live. So I contacted my friend Elizabeth Roberts, who's married to a doctor, and I said, I'm in Phoenix. My voice is totally gone. I'm going on CNN tomorrow morning. I need my voice back now. Can your husband help? She's like, oh God, James, really? I'm like, oh yeah, I need this bad. So I get her husband on the phone. He's like, man, I really shouldn't do this, but I think it's this drug you need. Can you see a pharmacy? I said, yeah, I see one across the street. He's like, okay, I'll call it in. So he calls in the thing. I pop these pills, jump on an airplane, fly off to New York. My crew flies to Stephenville, Texas. And I did that. My voice literally came back within like an hour. Like it slowly came back within an hour of going on CNN Live. And the cool thing was, this is why I was so adamant about it. So when I showed up that night to Stephenville, everyone had seen me on CNN. So the town knew who I was, and they knew that I was defending what they'd seen. So all of a sudden I was on their side, right? So suddenly I had access to everybody. And this is something that if you get the media on your side, it can be really, really helpful. I can sound like a politician right now, but it's true. But I met with these Texans, and then I met with the police officer, and there was something really magical period. And you guys probably remember this. This was like 2007, 2008, 2009. We had what appeared to be a push for transparency. And it was happening in France. It was happening we were getting lots of mainstream news coverage from cases. There was a massive sighting in Stephenville. Things were lining up, and I really felt it was a magical time to be in this field. The French were letting out their UFO files. I had met with Jacques Patinet, who's head of CNES, Centre National d'Études Spatiales, which is like the French equivalent of NASA, getting an interview with this guy, Jacques Patinet. It was like, I speak French, but not that well. I speak it relatively well, but it's not technically well. And I did this interview with Jacques Patinet, and it was like, he basically says on camera, and this is a representative, I had to get permission from the government, from that division, CNES, to get this guy to go on camera. I had to submit this whole like long form. I had it all transcribed into French. It was really complicated. It took a lot of finessing. But to get basically the French government, an arm of the French government, to say that they think a small percentage of UFO accounts were extraterrestrial visitation. That's a huge statement from the government. And then you've got stuff was happening in England as well. I mean, it was a very, very exciting time. So I decided, foolishly, just thinking that I was stupid enough to think that I could pull this off. And I remember, at the time, I'm revisiting Out of the Blue. That was my initial intention. I got catapulted in the limelight when I broke this story with Governor Symington, and I'm riding this media wave that's like pretty exciting. Like, you know, you kind of feel like you got to take advantage of it. I know it's fleeting. I know it could be gone tomorrow. So I decided, like, let me ride this wave. Let me take advantage of the fact that I've got access to these people right now, and I'm going to do an event at the National Press Club, and I'm going to do it better than anyone's ever imagined. I'm going to get the most reputable foreign governments, officials, and generals, and I teamed up with a woman named Leslie Kane. I don't know if you guys have heard of her or not. She was working with Podesta a while earlier than that. And let me hold an unprecedented event at the National Press Club. And I remember, actually I have a photograph of my dad talking about this. I committed to it. It's really funny. I was in my bedroom. My sister was in the kitchen. My sister was listening to my phone conversation. I'm on the phone with the National Press Club. And the guy's like, I have it on speaker, so Kelly's listening to my conversation from the other room. And I said, yes, the ballroom, yes, the biggest one. Yeah, it's the biggest room, yes, the big one, okay. On this date, yeah, okay, how much is that? Okay, it's like $7,500, yeah, okay, so I'll take that room, please, on this date. And she's like, well, you need to put a credit card down for like 10%. I was like, oh, I can squeeze that. So I put credit card down, save the room, and I hang the phone up, turn around, and Kelly looks at me and she goes, did you just book a room at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C.? Are you out of your mind? Where the hell are you going to get the money? I was like, it'll come. We're going to pull this off. I remember at one point the realization, once the boat leaves the dock or something, it's like we're leaving. It's a little scary. Like, to be honest with you, I had a couple of nights where I was like, oh my gosh, where am I going to get all the way? How am I going to pull this off? Like, this is a really big event. Maybe I bit off more than I can chew. And I started to panic. I'm not kidding you. I panicked. And my dad pulls me aside. I'll never forget it. And he's like, son, he had a voice really weak. What's the worst case scenario? Oh, the media's not going to show up, and I'm going to run out of money. I'm not going to get this in the camera guys. I'm trying to get these camera guys to show up, and I'm having this dream that they're going to be up there, and no one's going to show up. And I rattle off this whole slew of things that could go wrong. And he very quietly sat there, and he nodded. Well, the way I see it, worst case scenario is you never went for it. And I thought, well, that's a really good point. That's a really, really, really good point. And he's right. And we pulled it off somehow. And the media shut up. And this is really funny. So I basically contacted CNN and I said, hey, here's what I'm doing. Would you guys give me a slot on Larry King to cover this? Now, Larry King's got an incredible footprint. I mean, his exposure is by far, at the time, unparalleled. I mean, the overwhelming response I'd get when I could always tell by the level of emails that would come in and contacts from people around the world that say, oh, I saw you on TV. It was always 10 times bigger when I went on Larry King than any other big, so I knew it was big. So they basically agreed, if you do this event, we'll cover it. It was like 3 days before the event. Well, I was in Los Angeles. We were going to go live on the set of Los Angeles. And we hadn't really done a lot of other publicity to promote this event at the National Press Club. And it was all about getting the media there and getting the coverage. Duh. I mean, what's the point of doing something if no one's going to see that you're doing it? So I have Charles Holt on an airplane from the East Coast to come out to live. I've got Jim Penniston on his way out. I've got satellite feeds set up in Denmark with Nick Pope, and all this is coming together. And at the time, this book was published by Shirley MacLaine. And Shirley was making all kinds of wild claims. I mean, it was just like, woohoo, crackpot time. And we were doing what we were considered as a very, very credible event with military and government officials from around the world. And, you know, Shirley MacLaine, I'm sure, is a wonderful person, and maybe some of the stuff she's saying is true, I don't know, but we didn't want to be associated, and especially a lot of the government officials didn't want to be associated with Shirley MacLaine. So I get a call. These guys are on the airplane coming out to do this whole thing. I didn't have any contingency plan for media coverage, and I get one of the associate producers of the show, I'll think of her name in a second, Ariel. Anyway, she goes, yeah, so CNN decided that you're going to split half the time with Shirley MacLaine. She's going to be on set with you guys. And I said, well, whoa, hang on a second. I said, yeah, that's not, yeah, no, we don't want to do that. Like, we're doing something very credible, and no. And she's like, well, that's the way it is. That's what the executives want. That's what's happening. So I call Governor Symington. And Governor Symington is going to be moderating the whole event. And it's a major coup that we got Governor Symington to moderate this event, believe me. And I call him and I tell him what's happening, and he goes, pull the plug. I said, Governor, pull the plug. I said, we don't have any other, like, this is it. He's like, pull the plug. So I was like, okay, I'll pull the plug. So I call back, and I said to the co-executive producer of CNN, I said, we're not doing it. She's like, okay, then we have no show. I was like, all right. And I was dying inside, like dying inside, okay? And I hang the phone up, and I start floods of tears pouring down my face, and the level of stress, because remember I was telling you what's the worst case scenario I was thinking? I was like, well, this is pretty much happening right now. This is like the worst case scenario. And I was walking down Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles out in front of the Econo Lodge. I'll never forget it. And I just like swelling my whole face up, the level of stress. God, it was so stressful. And I was walking around, I just hope to hell I did the right thing. I was like, all right. So Ariel Gallagher, that was the name, co-executive producer. Ariel Gallagher. And I get a call, and it's CNN. They call me back in about 10 minutes. And she's like, you know, James, you got some balls like that. She goes, I got to hand it to you. You got some balls. She goes, nobody turns down an hour-long CNN show, ever. That's never, ever happened. She's like, but you guys, and I sat there quietly. She goes, I told the head woman, Wendy is something, I'll think of her last name, that you pulled the plug on it. She couldn't believe it. She goes, I was really rooting for you in the background, but there's nothing I can do. It came from the higher-ups, and they said they're going to make a compromise with you. They'll have one small segment where she's on all by herself, and then you have the rest of the show. Is that a deal? And I was like, deal. Yes. And inside I was like, yes, we did it. So we did the whole thing, and I was thinking, well, you know, this revamping of Out of the Blue has really taken an unexpected turn. I went from like making Out of the Blue a little better to getting all this media coverage, which I never anticipated happening, to the National Press Club event. Again, I never anticipated that happening. Well, I can't just let it go at that. I'm going to make a movie about the entire event at the National Press Club. The hell with Out of the Blue, for now. So everyone's like, well, you can't make a documentary on a bunch of old retired military men at a podium. I said, well, Al Gore made a documentary at a PowerPoint presentation. You know? People were like, well, yeah, but he's Al Gore. I'm like, well, we can do it, you know? So I set out to do it, and my whole objective was to have a feature-length documentary that would come out in theaters. Call me, again, just naive enough to think that I could pull it off, but I might have been. This is a lovely picture of all of us at the National Press Club. That was a very exciting moment. I don't think anyone had any idea what was going through my mind. Like, did we actually pull this off? Like, this is an absolute miracle. I'll tell you a really funny side note before I move on. So this guy is a general, General Parviz Jafari from Tehran, Iran, the 1976 event. You remember that case? It's an amazing case. He's piloting in I think it was a Phantom F-4 jet. And he's chasing, he was told to scramble the jet and intercept this UFO with his jet. And he puts a lock on this thing, and he decides to shoot at it, which he later concedes that it wasn't probably not the best idea. All of his controls lock up. It's a fantastic case. He's a military general, but it was right after the time that they talked about, like, you know, the axis of evil in Iran, and he's Iranian, and he's got to get visas to come into the States, like huge, huge production. And I was actually going down the Grand Canyon right before this big event. I had scheduled it to go down with that guy, Martin Litton, who saved the canyon. I showed you guys photographs of him earlier. And I get a phone call as I'm about to go down the canyon. Now I'm going to be in black, like I'm off the radar for a long time down in the canyon. And everyone's like, this is a really bad time for you to be going down there. I was like, hey man, I've already scheduled it. I got to do it. I get a phone call from Leslie Kane. She's like, he has to go to Dubai like twice. One, to apply for his visa, another time, and you got to put him up in hotels, all the rest of it. It's going to be 10 grand just to find out if he can get the visa. And he might not even get the visa. What do you want to do? It's like, oh my God. I sat there and I was like, Jesus. And I had sold, one of the ways I'd raised some money is when I bought my 2 other partners out, I found out what they wanted to get bought out for, and then I sold their stake for more than what they wanted so I could use that money to do the National Press Club event. So money was sparse, but I had some. So I had to make the decision, like right on the fly, is it going to be worth getting this gentleman from, and I said, go for it. And I was down in the canyon. When I got out of the canyon, you know, I found out that he got the visa and he was able to make it. But it's a fascinating, fascinating story on that one. And he brought a bunch of promotional stuff from Tehran that was done on the event, which we got to include in the film for I Know It's All. So anyway, so I finished the film, and I got this really high-level guy to help me sell it. And Lionsgate looked at the film, and the guy loved it. The head of Lionsgate loved it. I've got a really good connection, and I don't want to give his name out publicly right now. And he's been so good to me over the years. And I pulled him aside one time, and I said, why do you do this? Why do you do so much? He's really well connected in the entertainment industry, right at the top. And he said, we were actually having a lunch together, and he's like, I was friends with, who was the guy that was the pool shark with Paul Newman in that film Hustler? Sorry? Jackie Gleason. Thank you. So he was friends with Jackie Gleason, and this is why he's been helping me over the years. He's like, well, I was friends with Jackie Gleason. Jackie Gleason pulled me aside and said, don't ever let anyone tell you that UFOs aren't real. Don't let anyone ever tell you. There's concrete evidence out there, you know, and really hammered it into this guy's head. And so he's now a top TV, top guy. And he, very quietly, behind the scenes, helps me out. And he nearly got I Know What I Saw sold to Lionsgate. Now, it wasn't just the money. That would have been great. But their distribution in place, their global distribution footprint would have been a major coup for me. But it went right up to acquisitions, and then the tech department looked at it and they said, we're going to have to take a pass on this film because the production values weren't up to their standard. And it was just the most devastating, like, you know, and so they took a pass on it. I eventually sold it to A&E, which is like History Channel, subsidiary of History Channel. And I was kind of disappointed. I mean, to be honest with you, I was actually very disappointed. And I was pretty depressed. And my dad pulled me aside, and he goes, yeah, but son, look at what you did do. Don't look at what you didn't do, but look at what you did accomplish. And it was a good point. I was like, well, yeah, at least, you know, and we made our money back and whatever, we sold the film. But in the back of my mind, again, I felt like I didn't pull it off. I got close, I didn't pull it off. So there's a little side note. I'm going to share something really cool with you guys. Did I tell you about my letter from Steven Spielberg? Oh, this is so cool. Oh my God, you want to talk about opportunity missed. So Larry King watches the film, and he's like, wow, man, this is like the real life Close Encounters. I said, yeah, it's pretty cool, huh? He goes, yeah. He goes, I said, why don't you send it to Spielberg? I've been trying to get to Spielberg. As you know, I told you guys earlier how long I've been trying to get to Steven Spielberg. So he goes, okay. Of course, Larry King sends it over to Spielberg. Spielberg responds immediately. I get a phone call from one of his assistants, Jacqueline something. And she calls me up. I'm in Bolinas, my house. I live about an hour north of San Francisco. And she goes, you're not going to believe this. James Fox says, yeah. She goes, Steven Spielberg is about to watch a movie. I said, really? It was like 10 o'clock in the morning. I said, really? She said, yeah. I said, well, what's happening? She goes, well, I don't know. He took the movie, and he went into a private screening room by himself. I was like, wow, okay, well, thanks for the information. thanks for the call. I wasn't expecting to get a call. So I go down and have tea with my dad. I'm like, Dad, you're not going to believe this. Steven Spielberg's watching the movie. He's like, oh my God, that's so exciting. We got to call the neighbors, you know. So we all sat there for 94 minutes going, Steven Spielberg is watching my movie right now. This is amazing. It was very exciting. So anyway, I get a phone call a couple hours later. She says, hey, this is Jacqueline again. I said, oh, hey, how'd it go? She goes, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? She goes, well, he watched it, and then he wrote a letter, and he sent it to Larry. I was like, well, did you see what the letter said? She goes, no. I was like, well, did you talk to him about it? No, I didn't. I said, okay, well, thanks for the call. Hangs up. Well, I'm sitting there. About 2 days go by. I get a phone call from Abrielle Gallagher at CNN. She goes, James, we have something here you might be interested in. I was like, well, what is it? She goes, yeah, I want to send it to you. It's from Steven Spielberg. You should check this out. I'll send you the original. I was like, okay. So she FedExed it up to me from CNN headquarters in LA. And the FedEx guy, and I live in a small town, the FedEx guy, you know, kind of knows me a little bit. Like, you know, everyone kind of, it's a small town. He shows up at my house the next day and he goes, James, you're not going to believe this. You just got a package from Larry King. I'm like, yeah, and you're not going to believe this. Guess what's inside the package? He's like, what? I go, a letter from Steven Spielberg. He goes, can I stay here with you? Can you open it with me? I said, yeah, let's open it together. So when I was opening the package, I remember thinking, I don't want to, in my haste, open this package and rip this letter. You know how that can happen sometimes? You're like, you know. So I was very careful when I just opened it, just get it right, and voila. I was like, God. And I get this letter. So let me read you the letter, okay? Now you guys, do me a favor and really read this carefully, okay? Read it very carefully because it's rather interesting. Now, do you want me to read it to you or you guys want to read it? I'll read it to you. Dear Larry King, with great curiosity, I watched the documentary you sent over and found it compelling. Personally, I would like to think we are not alone, and even though I have devoted a generous percentage of my movies to extraterrestrial-related themes, I, for one, have never seen a UFO. That's so unfair! Exclamation point. I hope you will continue to pursue this topic on your program, and that someday our government will offer a total disclosure about what they know about unidentified flying objects and their true and natural origins. I continue to enjoy watching you and all of your guests. All my best, Steven. So I'm like, so my dad goes, you got a quote from your movie from Steven Spielberg. And I said, yeah, Dad, but I don't really have it. I mean, he goes, well, you do. It's right there. You got the letter, you got the quote. So at this point, I had like an agent for, I think it was, yeah, with A&E for promoting stuff. You know, you get like a PR guy. And he's like, do you know what this quote would do for your movie? Like, you'd go from here to like up there. Like, what I could do at promoting you for this letter? So I said, well, you know, I gotta go through the right channels. I gotta talk to Steven Spielberg's publicist, Marvin Levy was his name. And I gotta get approval. So I'm thinking it's gonna be, you know, since I already have it. So I call his office and I get in touch with his publicist. He's been his publicist for decades, Marvin Levy. And I said, hi, my name is James Fox. I just produced this movie and and I want to get a quote from Steven Spielberg. He goes, oh, no, Steven doesn't do quotes. He doesn't do that. I said, no, hang on, hey, hold on. I already have the quote. He goes, what do you mean you already have the quote? I said, I have the letter. It's from Larry King about my movie. I already have it. I just want to know if I can use it. And he goes, I could tell he got really nervous. He's like, you have it already, huh? I said, yeah, I got it in his own writing. I got the thing. And he's like, let me get back to you on that. So he gets back to me the very next day, and he says, Mr. Fox, and Marvin Levy here. I said, oh. He goes, yeah, we'd really appreciate it if you went ahead and not use that for right now. That'd be great. I'm like, gosh, well, I mean, okay, but I don't understand. Like, Steven Spielberg, someone's dedicated all this time and energy, and I'm just this little independent filmmaker, and this would make the world of difference if there's something that he doesn't agree with in the film, or I misrepresent the facts. I'm fairly conservative in my, you know, da-da-da-da. He's like, yeah, not right now. So I had to just tell everyone that I couldn't use this letter, which was, again, just like, why? Why not? What is it gonna, what skin it off is, you know? He finds it compelling, that's it. Not it's all totally real or the UFOs have landed. So I couldn't use it. So that was, you know, one of these things. So anyway, a couple years went by, and I think I showed this. I've never gone on television with the letter, although I might, but I did show it at UFO Congress for you, I feel like 5 years later, 6 years later, and I said, I think I contacted Marvin Levy's office, and I said, I intend to show this letter. If you have, excuse me, if you have any objections, you know, let me know. And he didn't. So that was that. So it's 2010 now, and the BP oil spill happens. I told you that I'm kind of into conservation stuff, and I'd done, you know, and on the one hand, I was done with you. I really was. I was done this time. And I think I even said that to Larry Landsman, who was one of the first people that bought my film out of the blue. And he goes, well, James, I've heard that one before. I said, yeah, but I think, yeah. And he goes, yeah, but you said you were going to do a theatrical release. I said, yeah, but I'm done. I don't know. I can't. I'm exhausted. I really was. I really was kind of expecting, because of doing the National Press Club event and doing the film, that more people would come out of the woodworks and help me and finance me. And I actually had an interesting meeting with Bigelow. You guys know Bigelow? Yeah. Oh, let me tell you about that. Hold on. That's kind of cool. I haven't had any water. Yeah. So I got an email from Mr. Bigelow. It's from his secretary. This is after I know what I saw was aired. She goes, yeah, Mr. Bigelow just wanted you to know that great film, really tips his hat to you. Wonderful effort. So I knew kind of who Bigelow was, but I did a little research on him. And I was like, holy Jesus, this guy's like a billionaire, and he's air and space, and they refer to him in the Air Force to like send all this UFO-related material to him, and he's got this incredible archive, and he's put millions of dollars, and there's NIDS, and Jacques Vallée had worked for him, and wow. All right, well, let me get a... So I responded, thank you so much. I really appreciate the kind words. Would by any chance, because I cut straight to the chase, would he be interested in funding one of my efforts? She's like, yeah, maybe, yeah. Why don't you come have lunch? So I go and meet with Mr. Bigelow at his place in Las Vegas. And he's very, I say guarded, but the feeling I had was that he was more interested in finding out what my next move was than really interested in funding my thing. And at the end of the day, I even said this to him. I said, Mr. Bigelow, like, excuse me, but what side are you on? Like, who are you really working with here? Like, literally, okay? And so I was sitting there going, okay, note to self, like, he's got a vault of stuff that he's been gathering for decades. He's probably spent more than any other civilian on the planet by a long shot, and he's not sharing it with anybody. Got Skinwalker Ranch, he's worked on NIDS, like God only knows what this guy's uncovered. And he's not wanting to share it, and I know, because when I would research cases, I'd be in touch with some of the field investigators, and they're just like, well, I don't know, like, you know, Bigelow came in with his crew, and they took everything. I'm like, what do you mean they took everything? He's like, well, they paid for it and took it. I'm like, well, what did they do with it? I don't know, they just took it away. So I knew all this stuff ahead of time. It was like, well, what do you know, where's this stuff going? So anyway, so I'm, yeah, anyway, that's my experience with Robert Bigelow. I don't want to say anything further at this point, but so I did a film. Meanwhile, 2010, just finished my film. I'm kind of recovering from the whole process, which it was a hell of a ride. And, you know, the whole story of the BP oil spill, you guys know about that. I think it got to like, I don't know, day 22 or 23, and it was just this unrelenting gusher of oil spewing into the Gulf of Mexico. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I can't get this thing plugged. What the hell's going on? And then I got to a certain point, I thought, well, I'm going down there. I'm going to grab my camera and just do something. So I went down there. I raised a little money, and I went down there, and I think within 3 days, this is one thing about social media that was pretty impressive. Within 3 days, I was on a seaplane with a marine biologist by the name of Dr. Carl Safina. And we were on the seaplane flying over ground zero. And I had a camera, and it was a flimsy little seaplane with flimsy little doors, and the windows were popped up. And we're flying over ground zero, which is about 40 miles off the coast. Oil is bubbling up. There are fingers of oil as far as the eye can see on the horizon. I mean, it was apocalyptic, you guys. And I remember I turned, because I took my seatbelt off, and I turned sideways, and I had my knees propped up on the door, and there's massive window that was open because of the wind, the pressure of the wind keeping the door open. And I was filming, and the plane was sort of cocked around. It was flying round and round, all this oil and flames and smoke. And Jesus, man, it was insane what I was looking at. I couldn't believe it. And all of a sudden I realized that my entire body weight was pushed up against both of my knees. And if that flimsy little door had popped open, which was barely closed, I would have just plummeted to my death into this oil. And anyways, I had this realization. I was like, wait a minute, I'm really putting a lot of trust on this flimsy little door. And so I went back to the Gulf, and I produced this film, and it was a 5-year environmental impact study. I went submarines out of the seabed floor with scientists and flew over the top and interviewed the heads of NOAA. It was great. It was a really nice reprieve from the UFO thing, and I sold it to RT, which is Russia Today, and it got some mild distribution in the States, blah, blah, blah. Well, while this is going on, I'm approaching the end of the film. I get a phone call from this guy. Do you guys know who this is? Yeah, so Tracy Torme is the son of a very famous entertainer, Mel Torme. Mel Torme, so Tracy wrote, he worked on Saturday Night Live, he worked on Sliders, he worked on, he wrote the script for Fire in the Sky with Travis Walton. He worked on a lot of UFO television stuff. And he, like me, at one stage or another, very smart guy. Terrible diet, but very smart guy. Coca-Cola, potato chips. I'm like, dude, really? You gotta get with this. He's so smart, how could you eat such crap? I need a partner that's got sustaining energy, okay? But he said to me, he goes, you know, James, and he kind of introduced himself, and he had a very, very impressive track record, way more impressive than I'd ever have. And he said, you know, I'm a mainstream kind of writer in Hollywood. CAA is my agency, top agency, same agency as Spielberg. And I wasn't going to get into UFOs anymore. In fact, I was done with it about 20 years ago. And then I saw your movie, and I read Leslie Kean's book. And I decided that I was going to revisit, that I'd like to maybe revisit and produce for the first time this seminal documentary feature film that gets released in theaters and gets reviewed by all this, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And how would you like to team up with me on that? And I thought about it. I said, you know, because you remember what my goal was with I Know What I Saw. It was to produce the seminal, all-time best, you know, that could be presented to mainstream and accepted by mainstream and had a theatrical release and all this stuff. And I fell short. I fell short because of production values. I fell short because of the narrative wasn't strong enough. And I was like kind of a one-man band. I mean, I didn't really have the help and support and financial backing that I needed. And that maybe this time, with a mind like his and contacts like his, so we teamed up. And we... it was interesting, actually. Let me show you one of the first photographs. And how much time do I have before we have to take a break, you guys? I just kind of want to keep an eye on things. 10 minutes. About 10 minutes. All right, so what I'll do is I'll show you the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about the project, and then I'll show you some scenes from the project when we get back from. So he says, how would you like to do this project? And I said, yeah. Now, he said, well, so we put this whole proposal together, and as luck would have it, there happened to be a guy in the U.S., quite a wealthy guy, that had this epiphany and wanted to support a UFO-related theme, and had a big think tank, and all these people had a big party, and I approached the guy, and he was willing to fund some of it, so that would get the ball rolling. So my #1 interview was Colonel William T. Coleman. Now you can see me sitting down with him there. Does anybody know who William Coleman is? So William, you know, yeah. So William T. Coleman was an Air Force pilot. He was a colonel. He was public spokes officer for the Pentagon.
He was very instrumental in a film production called UFOs Past, Present, or Future with Robert Emenegger and Alan Sandler. That film had unprecedented cooperation from the Air Force. Has anybody seen that film? Yeah, so yeah, that film had unbelievable levels of cooperation from the Air Force. And it was because of this guy, who was at the liaison officer at the Pentagon for the Air Force, who was working with Alan Sandler and Bob Aaron. Now, the interesting thing about him is he also was like a spokesperson for Project Blue Book, UFO Investigation Project Blue Book. Now, the other thing that's very interesting about this guy is that in 1955, while piloting a B-25 bomber, he had one of the most dramatic UFO encounters I've ever heard of in my entire life, okay? He was in the plane of a B-25, it was 1955, flying over Alabama in broad daylight. I don't know what exact time it was. And they had an encounter with a disc that they pursued at different altitudes, and they ended up at what he called maximum continuous power at treetop level with a flying saucer, and 3 engineers from Lockheed Martin and Boeing and stuff on the airplane with him going, like, how is this possible? There's an object with no wings, with no tail, with no visible means of propulsion whatsoever, flying faster, 10 times faster than anything we can do, and they're chasing it at treetop level. And he says he has to do an evasive maneuver. He was literally going to hit this thing, okay? So he was flying so low on the treetop levels that he had to gain altitude first. So he had to, because if he dipped his wing, he would have dipped it and it would have hit the trees. So he had to pull up at 300 plus miles an hour, then dip the wing, just miss this thing, lose track of it for a second, and then look back and they see it going across this recently plowed field, okay? And it was stirring up dust on either side of this disc, stirring up swirls of dust on this UFO. And the encounter lasted several minutes. I think it was 9 minutes all in all. When they landed, this is the peak of Project Blue Book. This is 1955. You want to talk about qualified observers. They debriefed everybody. They all gave detailed statements, including the engineers and the pilot. And they all, and I think the guy said, he'd said that the guy had mentioned, wow, it was uncanny how paralleled all the sighting accounts were from these witnesses. I mean, really credible witness, really credible observation, really incredible incident. So what happens when they put him in charge of Project Blue Book, public spokesman? What's the first thing he does? Well, he wants to go find his sighting, of course. And guess what? Yeah, somehow it's just not there. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, it's like one of the most compelling incidents, and it's just slipped between the cracks, like a pursuit. Like when you hear this guy, so this is going to be the opening scene of the entire movie. So I'd known about this guy, and for me to sit there and give you all the details on how it led up to the interview, and all the things, it would just take too long. But suffice to say, before I barely even had funding on this project, I was like, we have to go interview Colonel Coleman. We have to go interview. Well, what's the hurry? Let's get a plan together. I'm like, no, we got to go get this guy. And I got, I just put my foot down, and we all flew out. We interviewed the guy. He died a few months later. Thank God I got it all on camera. It's the opening scene of the entire movie because it's so dramatic you guys won't believe it. But that's me meeting with Colonel Coleman. So another thing is, thank God to Tracy Torme, okay, who's still a script consultant, but I'm working with another guy as well on the project because he's got health issues. I told you about his diet. But Tracy's like, oh, we gotta do Socorro, New Mexico. I'm like, that was 1964. Come on, man. It's like, let's get some newer stuff. He's like, no, it's a really good case. I'm telling you, it's one of the best cases in America. We gotta get this in. So he talks me into it. That's the actual landing site right there. Now, are you guys familiar with the Socorro, New Mexico landing case? Just a handful of people? I'm sorry, it's Socorro, New Mexico, 1960. Police officer, yes. So, Lonnie Zamora, April 24th, 1964. He's in hot pursuit of a speeding car in downtown Socorro. Start going on the outskirts of town. He sees a flash of light, something in the sky that's totally not normal. He discontinues his pursuit of this speeding car and turns off up this dirt road to get a closer look at what this thing was because it looked like it was going down into this area. He gets
he has a difficult time getting his brand new police car to the top of this hill because the tires are spinning, it's in the dirt, and all these rocks are flying, and he's thinking, Jesus, this is a new police car, and I'm kind of messing it up here. But he takes another stab at it, and he gets to the top of this little hill, and he just rolls up the top, and he looks over, and he sees this egg-shaped object with landing gear sitting on the ground with two beings in white coveralls, white-fitting suits, walking around the craft as if they're trying to repair something. And he sees, there's a couple of different accounts, but he sees these objects, he sees these creatures, and he thinks they're children. He doesn't know what to think. He can't believe his eyes. And at one point, he gets out of the car, and I'm trying to decipher as to whether or not it happened once he got out of the car. He definitely made contact when he was still in the car, but he starts walking towards this object that's landed on the ground. One of them sees him, and I believe he's even saying something. And the ambiguity is because of his reluctance to talk about this whole thing, and it's going on newspaper accounts and accounts that he talked to with other people. But there's no question about it that he had eye contact. One of these creatures turned and looked at him and was startled and quickly scurried around to the backside of the object. Moments later, heard a big thud, and the object took off. It made a roar sound with a blue flame that came down, didn't hit the ground, the desert floor, and stir the dust up. It went right through it like a knife through warm butter. It didn't stir a bunch of stuff up. The object got about 20 feet off the ground, and then it went totally silent. You could hear a pin drop. And then it floated off and sped off away. When the first patrolman got to the scene, the bushes were still smoldering. There were deep imprints from the landing gear on the ground. There were footprints of the creatures. The first military officer was on the scene. Richard T. Holder shows up, cordons off the area, and they put rocks around the landing gear to kind of preserve where it was. And those rocks are still there. I was pointing to them right now from the landing gear at the landing site because no one knows where the real landing site is. They set up a memorial to it just about a quarter or a half mile away. And that's the actual landing site of the object. And his wife, I interviewed the wife, I interviewed the daughter, his children. I went to the National Archives. I got all the original Project Blue Book files that some of which have never seen the light of day, which talk about the imprints of the footprints of the. They actually draw a diagram and show you the footprints of the creatures in the Air Force files, and then the actual real symbol that was on the side of the craft in Dr. Hynek's own handwriting. Fascinating story, but the rocks are still there at the landing site. And it's one of the most fascinating cases. And Richard T. Holder, the first military officer on the scene, did a show called, not Sightings, but it was called Unsolved Mysteries. Have you guys ever heard of Unsolved Mysteries? Yes, it was. Robert Stack, Unsolved Mysteries. Yeah, so he did an interview for the first time ever. And I'm in touch with his two sons because unfortunately Richard T. Holder is dead. But Richard had all the plaster casts of the landing gear and photographs of the footprint, all this evidence that he was going to reveal for the first time ever. And he got a phone call, according to his two sons, yeah, you're not, kind of reminding him of his security clearance and reminding him of the repercussions. It's kind of scared the bejesus out of him, according to his two sons. And you have a case of that magnitude in Project Blue Book. Dr. Hynek was involved investigating it, where he sees not just a landed object, but beings on the ground, beings that he made eye contact with. And if you go to Project Blue Book's own files, you look at their conclusion, they say unexplained or unidentified, but it's like they jump handsprings to even to exclude the fact that this guy saw beings, not just a landed object, but beings. And that's like the difference between seeing an object on the ground and beings on the ground is the difference between the color black and white. And so, anyway, it's a fascinating story. And the more I dig into it, the more fascinated I am. And that's going to be also featured in the new film project. And I'll be showing you guys clips. Hang on a sec. What's this one? Oh, I was going to show you guys. Should we stop for a minute?
Yeah, let's stop for a break.
All right, you guys ready to stop for a quick break? All right, and then I got some juicy tidbits at the end. What? Yeah. Quick commercial break. You guys hear me okay? I'll give it just a quick second. Let everyone get settled in. Some cool stuff happening right now. Some of which I can share with you guys, and some of which I cannot share with you guys. But even more so than the Stevens. We got some music. Someone's cell phone going on. even cooler than the Spielberg letter that I had to keep biting my tongue on. You know how frustrating that was. Having something that could potentially, because it's all about publicity really at the end of the day. You could create a really good body of evidence, but if nobody sees it, what good is it, right? So, and there's some really exciting stuff happening, which I don't want to jeopardize, but I promise you, if it does come, if I do pull it off, you will be hearing about it. I guarantee it. But there's some of the stuff that I can share with you guys. So, I'm going to, pretty interesting, the landing site, the rocks are still there 50 years later, isn't it? So amazing. It was like, I really enjoyed just standing there and thinking, wow, people of another world possibly walked right here. You know what I mean? It's really, really cool. Really, really cool. Okay, so I'm going to share with you a recent meeting I had with John Podesta. But before that, I want to take you to this letter that I wrote in the 90s to the Clinton administration. And just lo and behold, I actually got a response on White House letterhead. But it was actually from a NASA. So let me read it, because that way the camera guy. Dear Mr. Fox, March 19th, 1999, on NASA letterhead, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Headquarters, Washington, D.C. Dear Mr. Fox, thank you for your message on February 7th, 1999 to President Clinton regarding UFOs, which was recently forwarded to NASA for reply. This is an interesting response. No government agency is currently responsible for investigating UFOs because there's no factual evidence that alien life exists on other planets or that UFOs are related to aliens. I'm enclosing our fact sheet explaining the history of government activity in UFO investigation. It includes sources you may contact for further information. I hope the contact listed on the fact sheet are of use in your investigation on the subject. Sincerely, Peggy Wild. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever read like the standard response that the Air Force will give you now. It's funny actually, because it'll say something like, well, we determined that no UFO exhibited flight characteristics that were beyond our current state of knowledge. Oh, okay, so wait a minute. So you're saying in 1969 you guys had objects without any wings, without any tails, without any visible means of propulsion, that could hover, that could accelerate from the standstills out of sight and in the blink of an eye, like really? So I asked that guy who was former part of Project Blue Book, the guy that I just showed you here earlier, was that here? Yeah, Colonel Coleman there, and on camera. I was like, I read him the exact statement verbatim from the Air Force closing statement. He was part of that project. He's like, yeah, that's not really accurate. Because he's like talking about the sighting he had in 1955. So it's interesting, and along with this letter. So I'm saying this because I was trying to get to the Clintons for, just obviously, again, who'd like, oh, I'm going to contact President Clinton, he's going to give me a response. Like, yeah, good luck, But so it's been a while, because during the Clinton administration, there were a lot of very amazing things going on. I mean, a lot. You had the Lawrence Rockefeller Initiative. You had the presidential briefing document. You had the 50th anniversary of Roswell. You had the handful of military officials that dealt with Roswell that were still alive. And there was Congressman Stephen Schiff. You remember him talking about publicly about getting the runaround when he was trying to get access to government files related to Roswell. And people were being very outspoken. There was a lot of momentum. Then you had Rua Zimbabwe case. You had the Virginia case that was happening down in South America. Big cases. You had Phoenix Lights with the governor of Arizona, who coincidentally, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, Governor Fife Simonton was like, well, I'll help you get to President Clinton. It's like, oh, you know President Clinton? He goes, oh yeah, I know President Clinton real well. I was like, really? He goes, yeah, I saved him from a drowning incident back in college. It's like, oh yeah, he was like, Bill Clinton, he goes, oh, it was real easy too, because I got in the boat, he got caught in a riptide, and he got swept out to sea, and I jumped in a boat and I paddled out there, and he goes, it was real easy because all he had to do is reach down and grab the mop of hair in the water, because he had long hippie hair, right? And he's like, I just grabbed him down and pulled him out. Fast forward 20, 30, whatever years, and Governor Simonton was tangled up in some financial shenanigans and was being indicted from the feds. And he was, and he received a preemptive presidential pardon from President Clinton, making him untouchable. So it was kind of interesting little thing. So he's like, yeah, I can help you get to, but that was unfortunately didn't pan out. But so just recently, you remember when I it's a long journey. I'm sharing this journey with you. But you remember I was telling you that story when I got Fife Simonton to come clean on not just like looking into the UFO sighting that occurred in '97 in Phoenix, but when he said, I saw it too, and he's a captain in the Air Force, he's a pilot. He's like, I knew right away that thing was not of this world. And I said, how's that? He goes, the size of it, it was huge. So remember I told you I was pinching myself? Well, I was pinching myself here too, because of how much time I spent trying to get to the Clinton administration. I mean, this is a guy, I don't know if you guys are familiar with John Podesta or not. I am apolitical when it comes to UFOs. I'll talk to Republicans, Democrats, independents, conservatives, liberals, I don't care. If you got some information, I want to hear it. So John Podesta was chief of staff for President Clinton. He was counselor to President Obama, involved with the transition team, and he was also the head of Hillary Clinton's campaign for office. Now, I don't know, do you guys hear about like how these emails leaked out? So they got this, they got an email basically that said, oh, our administration is testing something, or there's been a breach of security, would you like to do X, Y, and Z? And the person on the receiving end of the emails contacted John Podesta or his people and said, hey, this email came in, and they responded, don't open it. But instead they put open it. So they missed something out, like open it, so the person's like, okay, I'll open it, and that's how it happened. It was simply that stupid, like that little tiny, anyway. So we went out, so I got an interview with him, I think it was in March of this year. And it was a pretty big deal. I mean, I was very nervous. I was very, very curious as to, his efforts and how outspoken he's been on the topic over the years, since like what, 2003, 2002? He's worked with the Freedom of Information with Leslie Kean. He did that effort with the Sci-Fi Channel where he stood up at the National Press Club and, talked about the need for government transparency and the fact that the public can handle the truth. And that was one of my questions to him. It's like, all right, well, if you're prepared to say that, the public can handle the truth, that must mean that you know what the truth is. Because how could someone be ready for it if you don't know what it is? You know what I mean? So I was like, what's going on here? And he was reserved, but he said that there was a genuine interest in the Clinton administration to get to the bottom of some of this stuff. We had the 50th anniversary, as I was telling you earlier, with Roswell. There was a lot of media coverage going on. We had behind the scenes Lawrence Rockefeller pushing Clinton. So Clinton signed an executive order, 12958. And that was sort of a sweeping executive order to release previously classified documents 25 years or older. So obviously Roswell being 50 years old, that would fall into the category of Roswell and anything else relevant on the topic. And Podesta said that they were not happy with the response they were getting. And I said, well, what exactly do you mean by that? And he was like, well, let's just put it this way. The military was not forthcoming. It's like, not forthcoming. Well, did they say, because people would say to me, like, well, how on earth would any government keep this classified? And why would a president, of course a president's at the top. He's the head of the whole, everything, the government. There's no president that would ever be kept out of the loop. And I'm thinking to myself, well, actually, the more I look into this, the more I come to the realization that I don't think the presidents for decades have had access to this. Yeah, I really don't. And I know so. I spoke briefly to President Ford. I got a phone call from him. So I tried to get to President Ford forever, like I've done with everybody else. Penny Circle was his secretary. And it was like, no. It was like, and every time I get a no, I just said, try again. Finally, so I lived with this guy, Tom, who was an engineer for IBM. And he was kind of this geeky guy with bad breath. And he never ever had any luck getting the women. And he had one rule of the house. if I'm ever in the hot tub with a woman, which never happened, if I'm ever in the hot tub with a woman, do not bother me. And he was very serious about that. I was like, Tom, I won't bother you. If you're ever in the hot tub with a woman, it's fine. I get a phone call at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday from Penny Circle. I pick the phone up. She's like, the president's ready to talk with you. I said, the president's ready to talk with me? She said, yeah, President Ford, you've been trying to get him to talk with you. He's ready to talk to you. I said, I'm not ready. I got to get ready. I got to get my questions together. I needed some sort of recording device. She said, we'll call you back in 5 minutes. Well, I was like, oh my God. I look over and Tom's in the hot tub with a woman. I swear to God, you can't make this stuff up. And I go outside, I'm like, Tom. He goes, what did I tell you about me in the hot tub? I said, President Ford's calling me in 5 minutes. I need a recording device. He's like, President Ford's calling. He leaps out of the hot tub naked as a jaybird, runs across the house, and he's putting together this recording device last minute, trying to get ready to get a statement from Ford. And it was just hilarious. You guys?
Morgan.
Morgan, nice to meet you, Morgan.
Have you ever heard of Eisenhower's supposed extraterrestrial meeting?
Yes.
And what's your thought on that?
Total hogwash. But, I have a caveat on that one. So in the film, UFOs Past, Present, and Future by Alan Sandler and Emenegger. It was produced, I think, in 1972 or 74. There was a later version in 79 that was released. It's Begun or something. That film had unprecedented access to military. I'm trying to give you the shortest response that'll really talk about what you just said, because I didn't believe in a landing at Holloman Air Force Base until I started researching a deathbed statement, which led me to Emenegger. It was a guy named Colonel I'll think of his name in a second. But anyway, he was dying. He gave a deathbed statement to his nurse about UFOs that crashed, something like this. And it went to Bob Emenegger, who I interviewed for my new film. And I said to Bob, why is this Colonel Weinbrenner? Why did Colonel Weinbrenner, who's working over at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio, have a deathbed statement to you? And he said, I asked him a question when we were producing UFOs, Past, Present, or Future. And remember, if you see that movie, you'll see a level of participation in the military, access to military bases, never seen before, ever, in any film. Who gave the go-ahead for this? They combed through every single statement from the narrator to approve it ahead of time before the film was to be broadcast. Okay, so the Air Force basically, looked at this film and approved everything ahead of time. In this film, they talk about a landing at Holloman Air Force Base, and they say this is an event that may have happened already, or maybe it's going to happen. And then they proceed to have this landing when the occupants get out and interact with the base commanders. Sounds out there crazy, right? Well, when I was investigating the Zacor, New Mexico sighting in the 60s, I came across these articles written from Coral Lorenzen, APRO, or one of these bulletins, yeah, okay. She's a very credible reporter on the topic of UFOs, and she had interviewed a couple of guys, military guys, at White Sands and Holloman Air Force Base, where they claimed the landing of a flying saucer at Holloman. I'm thinking to myself, well, boy, this is a really credible article, and these people are coming forward, and they're talking about what they'd seen, and wow. Then there's a guy named, he worked at Norton Air Force Base, Paul Schartle. He worked at Norton Air Force Base, and he showed footage of a landing of a flying saucer at Holloman Air Force Base to one of the producers of the film. And how do I know this? I spoke directly to the guy. So Paul Schartle saw the footage. We have him on camera talking about the footage that exists. Then we have Alan Sandler, who told me, from his mouth to my ears, that he was shown this footage. He assumed it was a flying saucer that was in the possession of the United States Air Force. And he talked about the creatures getting out. And when I want to hear a really good, and I'm getting to your point, you're going to see why I'm getting to this. It's a roundabout way of answering your question. When I want to really absorb what a witness is telling me, I close my eyes. Because then I get all the words that recreate the imagery in my mind. And if I'm missing them, I can ask and be more precise about something. I close my eyes. I said, Alan, I want to hear exactly what you saw. And he described to me. He said, there was a couple of flying saucers out in the distance at high altitude, flying in, being escorted by military jets. 2 of them peel off, and then one of them wobbles its way down to the ground. And he said, just like in the sci-fi movies, this seamless door opens, and out come these creatures in tight-fitting suits, very large noses, vertical slits like cat eyes, head regalia like, yeah, something like that, exactly. Slits for mouths, and they had a little device, some sort of weird device that he assumed was some sort of communication device. 2 of them got out and flanked the door to the saucer, one on one side and one on the other side. And then the third one, who seemed to be the head honcho, came out, met with base commanders, and off they went. My point is, if this did happen, and if this story did in fact leak out, there's nothing better to obfuscate a story, to throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing, than make up some tale of President Eisenhower meeting with aliens at at this military base, because there's no evidence, credible evidence, in my opinion, I've never seen any, to suggest that actually occurred, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest a landing did occur at that base. So what better to obfuscate the whole thing by saying that President Eisenhower had a face-to-face meeting with aliens at Holloman Air Force Base? That's my story. So I hope I answered that. Did I? Okay, good. Sorry, you have a gentleman? Oh,
James.
oh hang on, get a microphone. Nope. Oh, okay, sorry. Sorry about that. Could you say your name, please?
My name's Darren. Nice to meet you, James.
Nice to meet you, Darren.
Thanks for coming to Burwood.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you for having a part of changing my life.
Oh, thank you.
I just wanted to find out how familiar you are with Westall in '66, because it's almost a mirror of Rua.
Well, I'm going to Westall tomorrow, and I'm meeting with the witnesses, and I've got camera crews and audio crews, and I'm going to be documented, because when I heard about it, it was like, yeah, landing over in Westall, yeah, students and UFOs, yeah, sure, yeah, you know. Then, no, you got to take a look, you know. I don't know why I'm so like, you know, but I am, and the more I looked into it, and then I watched some of Shane Ryan's documentary and some of the testimony, and I thought, my God, this is really similar to Rua. I'd be a fool not to cover this case. So yes, thank you. I'm going to be meeting with witnesses, meeting with one of the gentlemen that took the photograph, meeting with the science teacher, and see what I come out. Hopefully, I'll come away what I come away with. Yeah, but thank you on that, because
a documentary, just those 2
skills. Yeah, I know, and that's the thing. Yes, yeah, I know. But I really feel like those things on their own, without building your case, it would be just too hard to believe for those. Yeah, but thank you for bringing that up. We've got...
Hi.
Oh, so sorry. Can you give us your name?
Yeah, my name's Karen.
Hi, Karen.
I'm Morgan's mom.
Oh, hello, Morgan's mom.
That's why we're here today, actually, because she found out about this last night, just last night.
No way.
Yeah, I was so happy when I heard about it. I was so excited, so really happy.
I'm so glad.
Thank you for coming to Australia.
Thank you.
I just wanted to know why it is you think that governments now are becoming transparent or more open about the subject. But why are they starting to admit this finally? Okay, what's causing this disclosure?
You know, so God, that's a good question. So I asked the question to MOD guy Nick Pope, who investigated UFOs for the British government, and we were walking along the Parliament, and I said, "So, do you anticipate, you know, any type of government disclosure?" Because things were happening, like the French were releasing stuff, the MOD was releasing stuff, not all the juicy bits, but some of the stuff. And
so what does MOD stand for?
Ministry of Defense. Sorry about that. Yeah, and he said, "Well, James, it's not going to happen with a big D. It's going to happen with a small d." And that left a sort of indelible impression on me. It's like, so maybe they're slowly seeping stuff out. Maybe they want the monkey on their back. One of the positions that we're taking in this film, which I know upsets a lot of the staunch UFO, I hate to use the word believers because I get chucked in that category all the time. Hey, are you a believer? It's like, well, I got some information that I believe has happened. Yeah, if you want to call me the believer. Oh, he's a believer. You know what I mean? But the position we're taking in this film is that the secrecy is not so much an issue of what the government knows, it's more a question of what the government doesn't know. Now, does that mean that they know that UFOs are real, they're under intelligent control, they're whizzing around with impunity, all this, they disabled nuclear weapons, people have gone aboard, all this stuff? Yeah, it doesn't change that at all. But does that mean that they have all the answers beyond that? What is their agenda? Where do they come from? In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, and you guys can totally disagree with me all day long, and I'll respect that, I don't think they know. And if anyone tells you they know, they have all the answers, in my opinion, they don't have all the answers. So, but I am convinced, and I think that the governments are far more willing to participate in my production if I take that position. And if that position is going to increase the likelihood of participation on their part, I'll take that position. And that position is, yes, they're real. Yes, we know they're real, but there are a lot of things that we don't know, and that's why we've kept it from you. If that makes any sense at all. And I would just speculate as to why the government transparency thing's happening. I don't know. It seems like it's happened in increments. And when you think about it, it's like, oh, you think this UFO cover-up for all these years. It hasn't really been that long. If you think about like one person's lifespan, that's pretty much it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, previously there was just a big clap on it.
Yes, yes, yeah.
That's why I was wondering why.
You know, I just have to say that maybe, you know, there was an internal debate back then. There might be still one today. There are some that feel like, hey, man, that people have a right to know and let's get it out there. And probably others that feel the other way about it, you know?
Maybe also the internet.
I'm sorry?
Maybe also because of the internet.
Yes, well, that's, yeah, but there's a lot of hokey stuff on the internet too. So you have to be, you know, really careful on that one. Sorry. Tell us your name.
All right, my name's Jamie Leonard. I want to thank James on behalf of us for bringing more credibility to this subject worldwide than anyone else who was going about making it.
I really appreciate doing that. Thank you so much.
Now, you'd be aware that Tracy Tilmer, your partner here, was actually involved in the production of UFO Cover-Up Live, where they discussed what was happening with that Robert Ebeneger film. And if you go up on YouTube, anyone can look at that movie. It's past, present, and future UFOs. Rod Serling's last narration job with Burgess Meredith. There is 3 seconds of that original footage in that storyboarded section at the end of that film.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
I've seen it. Yeah, and I've heard that too. Yeah.
And also on the cover of Look magazine from 1967, there is a photograph of a glowing object mounting the perimeter fence of Holloman Air Force Base, and it's credited to that inside. It's the hard copy Look magazine on flying saucers.
I have that.
You know, September 11 happens, and on the very same day it happens, everyone knows it's Osama bin Laden. The media is saturated with
The O'Hare incident got major mainstream publicity, and it's amazing that the media, if you would take 3% of the media going after politicians' sexual peccadillos, like Monica Lewinsky or something, if you took 3% of those resources and 3% of that effort to get, like, if you took like a Ken Starr and like went after, that's what it would take. And it's not that, you know what I mean? Like, follow up. That disc that hovered over Terminal 17 at United Airlines, remember? Yeah. Punched a hole in the cloud when it left, and it was witnessed by United Airlines people. Okay? They know the difference between, you know, what did they call it? They called it like weather phenomenon, or I don't know what the hell. It was like, yeah, that it punched a hole in the cloud. It was hovering there for like several minutes.
But what's going to be enough for people? I mean, we've had
well, they didn't. They covered it in the media. They got headline news. It really was a big story on the Herald, Chicago, whatever. But they didn't follow up. Like, demand answers. Like, hold their feet to the fire. Like Governor Simonton. That was a missed opportunity that frustrates the hell out of me. You had the world watching in 1997 when this thing catapulted into the limelight. There were thousands of witnesses across the state of Arizona. The governor himself saw it. If they could have just said, if they could have, right there on the cusp of it, they could have just pushed it a little further, but they didn't. And that is incredibly frustrating to me. And I'm sure it is to a lot of other the rest of you as well. It's that follow through, to hold their feet to the fire. I want an answer. You know, not weather phenomenon that punched a hole in the cloud when it left. Like you got.
You were at the press conference where Bob Simonton put the ad in there.
Oh no, I wasn't at it, but I watched it. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't physically in the flesh, no, but I was investigating the case when it happened. Yeah, I was totally frustrated by that. Are you kidding?
How reasonable do you think it was for him to use as an excuse that there was so much rising paranoia, he felt pressure to make light of it?
I had a couple of cocktails with Fife Simonton, okay? Because I thought, I'm going to have a couple of cocktails in with him. And we had there were a couple of my sister and her girlfriend, and lively conversation and drinking some cocktails. I'm thinking, okay, I'll get this guy kind of, a couple drinks in him. That always loosens things up a little bit, right? And I thought, I'm going to pop this question on him because I'm not buying the fact that, he got a phone call from somebody, shut this down. That's what I feel. And Fife would never, I can't say for sure. Technology that was coming from somewhere else, right? And so, again, I'm ultra conservative when it comes to, and I know that a lot of my fellow UFO researchers would probably boo me off stage for saying this, but I just need to see a lot more evidence before I'm willing to make that leap of faith. Yes. Yeah.
Do you to say too much?
Okay, so I don't think I told you guys, well, I did tell you some of this. When I got contacted by Robert Bigelow, he's working with Elon Musk today, putting some of his
Hi, James.
Hello.
Adam is the name.
Hello.
Really enjoying the talk. Thank you so much again for coming out.
Oh, thank you.
So my question's more on your personal experiences. Have you had any UFO sightings yourself, or indeed contact with extraterrestrials that you're willing to share with us?
So he was asking if I've had a personal experience myself, and the answer to that is yes. When I was 20 years old, I was getting ready to go to live in France for a year, and I was dating a girl named Lisa Reinhardt. We were lying in bed together. It was about maybe 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I had a big window to my right. And I remember this other girl that I talked to, and she had her previous boyfriend was into UFOs, and I remember just quickly dismissing the guy as a crackpot. I mean, it was like that. Like as soon as she said it, I said crackpot. It was like UFOs, crackpot. It was like that fast, just done. You know, dismissed him immediately. This is funny. So we had like a queen-size bed, and to the right was a fairly good-sized window. I would say it's about the size of this pull-down screen, maybe a little smaller. And it's dark, looking out the window, and we see this and again, I had no interest in UFOs at all. Couldn't have cared less about them. We see this thing that looks like an egg, maybe about the size of a small Volkswagen, maybe a little smaller, Volkswagen Bug. And it was at treetop level, and it was kind of like pulsating, but in one spot. It was stationary. And Lisa Reinhardt looks at me, and she said, "What the F is that?" And I looked at her, and I said, "I don't know what that thing is, but whatever it is, I get the impression it knows we're looking at it." And she said, "I feel it too. Close the blinds." So I leapt out of bed in my underwear, and I'm in my haste, I'm trying to desperately close the blinds. I ripped the blinds right off the wall. They hit the floor. I picked them up, and I'm fumbling trying to get them closed. Finally get them closed. Clutching each other in bed. I don't know how long went by. A couple of minutes? I'm not entirely sure. She goes, "I wonder if it's still there." I wonder too. So I draw the blinds a little bit, and it was gone. So my sister, Janine Fox, comes home about an hour later from a concert. She goes, "What are you guys doing? Your lights are on." And we looked at each other, and we went, "We just saw a UFO." She goes, "Really? What did you see?" We told her briefly about it. And here's the kicker. Never spoke about it ever again. Woke up the next morning, lived with my dad at the time, going off to France for a year. Never spoke to my father about it the next morning. Never talked to Lisa about it ever again. Never talked to my sister about it ever again. Never talked about it, period, ever again. About 20 years later, I was visiting my friend John Kimmel down in Southern California in San Diego, and he has this whole jogging routine. He gets up in the morning, he's a super fit guy, and he runs down the beach, and he swims out to this buoy, and he comes back, and then he's like, "Oh, come with me," you know. And it's like, I'm a fairly fit guy, but it's like, I don't know about running 5 miles on the beach and swimming a mile out to this thing, but I did it. And we came back, and we got to the point of the beach where we just swam out to this buoy, and to go left, to go back to the car, and I said, I want to go right. And he goes, "There's nothing to the right." And I said, "I just want to go explore the beach to the right." He goes, "James, the car's parked to the left. We're going to go get some, tacos, whatever." And I said, "I want to go to the right." He's like, "Okay, there's nothing to the right." So we went to the right. Who do I bump into? Lisa Reinhardt. Lisa's on the beach visiting from like some place way away, like 500-600 miles away, with her new husband and her daughter. And I look at Lisa, and I couldn't believe it. She's like, "James, what are you doing?" And she knew my friend John, too. And we talk, and I pulled her aside. I was like, "Lisa, remember that UFO sighting we had?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, "What do you remember?" Because I was curious. And she told me, and she remembered exactly like it I did. And I said, "Do you ever talk?" I said, "No." I said, and she goes, "Isn't that funny? I've seen you in the new, you're doing UFO stuff now." I said, "Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird." And that was it. That was it. But she remembered exactly as I remembered it. But I would categorize it as the only thing really truly remarkable about it was the fact that I said, "I feel like it knows we're looking at it," and she said the same thing. So that was it. Yeah, so to answer your question, yeah, I don't really talk about it that often, to be honest with you, because I feel like people would think that it would influence my thought process today on my position on the whole thing, and it has nothing to do with it. My thought process and my conclusions are drawn merely from the witnesses and the military and government officials that I've met with. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, great question, though. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, James. Tim's my name.
Tim.
Sorry, was someone else? Oh, I'll go. It was my name is Dudley.
Oh.
I'm very sorry about my voice.
side. I think he presented it very, very well. I don't really think the world is ready for landing yet. It holds such chaos.
You don't think the world's ready?
Absolute chaos.
Yeah. So he's saying that he's not necessarily sure the world is ready. Well, yeah.
Chaos of the world.
Yeah. I think we need something to sort of bring us back to, I think that we would potentially, maybe, I mean, this is just, maybe it would be just what we need. You know what I mean? We would start looking at ourselves as what we really are, all one species, all one race on this planet all together. It's like, duh, it's like, really? Yeah, anyway. Anyone else?
Yeah,
sorry, we've got a couple more.
Yeah, Tim's my name.
Hi, Tim.
Just asking about your series, Chasing UFOs, which is on Netflix.
Yes.
It's good fun, but I found myself getting frustrated that think, why are they tripping over at night, looking at the ground so they fall over and not looking at the sky?
Yes. Biggest mistake I ever made. Carry on.
I was just wondering what you...
Well, I knew that it was going to be dumbed down, it was going to be targeted at a younger audience, but there was a lot of good stuff that was in there, and I actually lamented with this guy David West, who was one of the photographers on the series, and so I went along with, okay, if we can have 60-70% good information coupled with entertaining stuff, traveling and night stuff and whatever, I was willing to kind of go along with it, thinking that, all right, well, I can. But they ended up doing 90% garbage and 10% substance. And I watched one episode and I couldn't watch the rest because I knew how good it could have been, how good it could have been. And I spoke out against it on a Facebook page, and that got printed up in the Huffington Post, and the heads of National Geographic were livid with me. I mean livid, because I was the host of the show and I was bad-mouthing it before it had even gone to air. And so then they made me do, they tried to make me do a public thing, which I wouldn't retract everything that I'd said. But, and then the other guy, Ben, who was the geologist, he was a great guy. He was on there as well, and he was just as frustrated as I was. They just, we went out, we did a lot of amazing stuff. Like if they would have kept the good stuff and put the other crap on the edit room floor, it would have been a great series.
It's still good fun.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, yeah. I mean, I was so disappointed that I just said I'm never doing that again. Like, lesson learned. And again, television has to be entertaining. They care about ratings, that kind of stuff. I get that. I get it. But if you could wrap something in with some nuggets of information and some nuggets of accuracy, they don't care about accuracy. They would do a recreation. But I'm like, whose testimony did you just do that recreation on? Like Bozo the Clown? That has absolutely nothing to do with what the guy just said he saw. And they didn't care. And that really bothered me. And a lot of the aspects bothered me. I actually got proposed, I probably once a year I get proposition to do a TV show. I'm like, absolutely not. I'm not interested. Thank you very much. I'll participate in some other shows. I did a Travel Channel special with a guy named Josh Gates, or Josh Gates. Yeah, I did 4 hours with him recently. But I made it work for me. Like if it was going to benefit me, then I'll do it. It was like, but I know that what television is, and that's, anyway. But thank you for bringing that up. We have a question at the back.
Hi James, I'm Peter Canalopoulos.
Hi Peter.
G'day. James, I'm just wondering if you pay any attention or have any interest in the subject of crop circles, and if so, do you have an opinion on that?
So I will tell you, he was asking me about crop circles. I was in England investigating UFO sightings for my first film, and I was near, I guess, Salisbury, right around Stonehenge. And I was investigating because I heard UFOs at scene. I'd actually gotten my hands on some pretty compelling UFO footage, which I had analyzed by Industrial Light and Magic. If you guys have seen Out of the Blue, how many people? Anybody? Yeah? So, and Out of the Blue, I had it analyzed. I actually went to Lucasfilm, Industrial Light and Magic, and I had this UFO stuff. And I was in the English countryside investigating. I went near Stonehenge, and I talked to this guy, this farmer. And he's like, I don't know about UFOs, but I'll tell you what, I went to put some petrol in my tractor and came back 15 minutes later, and there was this massive, design in my field. And it happened to happen probably in about 10 minutes. It was like, And I thought to myself, this guy was not looking for any publicity whatsoever. He wasn't like, you know, he didn't even want anyone. He plowed the field right after it happened. So why on earth would this guy make that up to me? And I thought, based on that very man's testimony, I think that clearly there must be something to it. But just like in any other phenomenon, right, there's lots of fakery and debunkery and all this other nonsense. So my gut is that there's a true phenomenon taking place, and it might be some sort of communication or attempt to communicate, but I know nothing more than that. Yeah. But people do that all the time, like, oh yeah, you're that UFO dude. What about Bigfoot? And what about like ghosts and stuff? It's like, they just like throw you into the hole, you're in that bucket right there. Well, it's just kind of part of the territory, you know. I had this one guy, I'll never forget it. He was a super rich guy. I should have got him to fund one of my movies, now that I'm thinking about it. His name was Mark, and he was super rich, and he lived in the house down with us. I used to live in a houseboat in Sausalito, which is just north of San Francisco. A friend of mine's mother bought it in the 70s and let us move in, and we just had a great time. It was right on the wall. Oh, beautiful. But the next door neighbor, 2 houses down, was a super rich guy, and he goes, oh, you're that UFO dude. Yeah, I know you. You're that UFO guy. He goes, you don't actually believe in any of that shit, do you? Like, he was dead serious, right? I said, no, he was dead serious. I said, oh, no, I just do it for the money. He goes, okay, good. I was like penniless, you know. So, anyway, are we... I would like to... I really want to extend a warm gratitude to all those involved in making this happen. There were a lot of moving parts. Mariana and who else here that can stand up, and we can give a round of applause to all those responsible for putting this on, because a lot of work went into this. Thank you. And without you guys, without your support, we wouldn't have it either. So thank to each and every one of you for coming out here and attending this event. I really appreciate it. I really do. Thank you. Yeah.